Oh, okay. I'm not hearing music. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Diverse Talking Heads. I'm Charlie Ramsey, and I'm going to be the moderator for this particular episode. And as you may know, I'm not normally in this role. I'm usually a panelist on this show, which I enjoy doing. However, we decided to do a little things differently tonight, and Kelvin and I are going to switch roles. And he's going to be a panelist along with our other panelists right now. So I'm looking forward to a very interesting conversation. So let's make sure Calvin is out there. Calvin, are you there?
Yes, Charlie, I am here, ready to go.
And that's what I thought so. So very good, sir. We'll talk a little more about the subject that we're going to do this evening in a moment. Let me introduce our fellow panelists, starting with the ladies. Hey, Amy.
Hi, everyone. It's Amy. Very happy to be here and excited to switch things up a little bit tonight.
Very good. Greetings, Karen.
Hey, it's Karen. Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Calvin not in the hosting seat.
And last but not least, hello, Dan.
Hello, this is Dan. Looking forward to a lively discussion.
Very good. So again, the discussion we're having tonight is on the subject of wrongful convictions. One thing I enjoy on this show is that, I've been involved in a number of episodes on this show, and we've done a diverse group of subjects on there, some of which I know a lot about, some of which could be of a personal nature and I'm more emotional about than others. And there are subjects on the show which I don't know a lot about. Maybe just in a general sense or something. And I think this subject of wrongful convictions is one of them. So I did a little research for the show, and I was going to make some opening statements as far as statistics and things like that. But earlier this day, I was still doing research on the show, and there was some interesting thing in the news regarding a wrongful conviction. So I'm going to just start with that first and just bring that out and maybe bring up some statistics later. So I was reading about a gentleman who was in Indiana. His name is, I believe, Keith, and he lives in Indiana. He was wrongfully convicted of armed robbery back in 1996. Keith is married. He has 3 children, and they're basically, long story short, and obviously could go a lot longer on this, there was a gross miscarriage of justice on this. So he was falsely accused by the police, particularly one detective, and the detective got other people involved in this well and basically cahoots with him. And long story short, Keith was convicted, and he ended up serving 7 years in prison. And it may have been longer, but at least 7 of it. So it was a long time. He was away, of course, from his family and all that as well. During that time, Keith's mother, to try to help him in the courts, mortgaged their home. Once Keith was in jail, his wife and children became homeless for a time. And obviously it was not a very good situation there. But long story short, he went through various organizations on that. And I've been reading on things such as the Innocence Project, and there are other organizations that Keith went through. And it was a long slog, to say the least. Eventually, and it took years, Keith's conviction was overturned. I believe it was 2016. After that, he sued the city he was in for what they did to him. And today, he won a judgment against the city, and it was for $7.5 million. So, but considering all the things he went through, obviously, that is certainly financially helpful. But considering all the things he went through himself and with his family, it's a great tragedy that happened. So I'm going to start off first. Actually, I'm going to start with Kelvin here. First question I have to ask you is, we've done a number of shows together, and we've had a number of interesting topics on here. And this is the first time you've chosen to be a panelist on that, this particular subject. Is there a particular reason for that?
Well, originally it was because this show was going to be taped on my birthday, and I wanted to just have that evening off. But secondly, I do want to be a panelist for this show because this is a topic that I and very passionate about. I've done a lot of research. I've heard a lot of things over the years. I actually know a person that was incarcerated for 15 years for a crime he didn't commit. And this is even after witnesses came forth. The person that actually did the crime came forth and said that they did it. And it did not make a difference. The system kept him for an additional 5 years or so. And even when he was exonerated, when he was found to be innocent, when they finally said, okay, we have all this evidence, we know you're not guilty, it still took another 3 years before he got out of jail. And yes, he was an African-American man. So I'm a little passionate about this.
I can understand that. And I should mention that the guy I was talking about is also African-American. Now, I'll just follow up with Calvin and we'll get to the rest of our panelists here. So as you, Calvin, I'm sure you know, but I will mention here, throw some statistics out on there. The wrongful convictions appear to be inordinately happening to African Americans here. And I'll quote some numbers here briefly. 58 of the cases that were determined to be wrongfully convicted are African American. African Americans only make up 13% of the population in the US. 33% of the wrongfully convicted are white. Whites, and that will include Latinos in that group, make up 76% of the population. So there's quite a bit of difference. I'm doing some math in my head. It's probably, I'm going to say at least 8 to 9 times more likely that would happen to a Black person. And then I'll just mention Latinos briefly on that. Latinos, which are normally sometimes subsetted into the white population of that 76, are actually about 18% right now. That conviction overturn rate was only 7%. So, Calvin, do you think there's a specific reason why that happens?
I think there's a set of specific reasons. One would be misidentification from the so-called eyewitnesses, actually identifying the wrong person. A lot of times when we've, in our culture, African-American culture, we joke about, all Black people look alike or all white people look alike. Well, I believe that in some instances, with different lighting going on, things like that, it is possible to misidentify a person and identify the wrong person. Also, there's false confessions. A lot of times African Americans have been beat, coerced, interrogated without their lawyers there. They've been without food or drink for a long period of time until they are just forced to give a false confession to something that they did not do. And once you give that confession, that's it. There's no going back. There's no saying I was beat. There's no saying I was hungry and tired. I was out of my mind. That's it. There's also the fact that more African Americans, and I would say poor people in general, would tend to have bad lawyers. If you can't get proper representation or someone to defend you, your butt is up the creek. So those are some of the reasons. There's other factors involved, and I'm hoping as this conversation goes on tonight, we'll be able to pull the cover off of some of those as well.
And on that note, I'm just going to throw out at first, just generally to the panel, then I may ask one of you specifically on it. Is there anything you could add right now to what Calvin is saying on that? Why is it always, or not always, I should say that's not right, but why does it seem to be there's a much larger number of Blacks, African Americans, who are wrongly prosecuted? Can anybody want to add something to that? Or else I'll challenge you on it. Why is that? Why do you think that is?
I think I
Go ahead,
think
Amy.
it's because, am I on?
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
From reading several articles and having been on jury duty, like Calvin said, one of the things is poor legal representation and lack of the financial resources to hire someone that can prove your innocence, who has the ability to hire outside investigators to determine whether or not you committed the crime. And like, we've seen cases where people were interrogated without their attorneys. And when you're put in a position where it's a long interrogation and you keep hearing the same thing over and over and over again, just some people just believe that if they say I did it, it won't be as bad, not realizing that once they go to trial, the sentences are real. This is where you're going to be once you're convicted. And what happens to the people who, when they go into the cold case and they go through, the people who are working to exonerate some of the innocents? What happens to the people what should happen to the people who say that this person did it and they didn't do it? They brokered a deal because they were in trouble themselves. It's so many circumstances and questions.
Amy, you want to add to that?
No, I thought that was a very interesting point that Karen just brought up. I hadn't even thought about that, but I thought that was a very, very interesting point. The only general point that I was going to make is that I always believe that the concept of othering is a very real and harmful thing. And that if, generally speaking, folks in power, such as judges or more powerful attorneys or even cops, tend to be predominantly white males in many cases. If you are looking at somebody that you personally don't identify with, meaning they literally don't kind of look like you or seem to have the same background as you, I think you are less likely to give the benefit of the doubt, even if perhaps subconsciously you don't quite realize what you're doing. And that contributes to it as well, that you've got, folks that are making decisions or putting down sentences or literally in charge of judging somebody, and they're being more lenient in some cases than others. And unfortunately, the audience that looks less like them is very negatively affected by it.
In the case that I mentioned earlier, there was, just to put it simply, the whole system was bad from top to bottom on this. The police got together and they created a scenario, if you will, that the gentleman was guilty. And there was total, so they ganged up almost like a gang of thieves there. And they all made sure of that, on that. And obviously that didn't work also, and they also held that up in court. So they also lied to that. So the question I would ask is how can we stop something like that? What can we do about that? I mean, obviously there's a lot of good cops up there, don't get me wrong, but there are bad cops. We know that. And there are bad cops that do bad things, particularly to Black people. So how do we get around that? What do we do on that? Anybody? Dan, I haven't heard from you yet.
Well, it's a power thing. So a lot of it's also a pressure. So especially in a high profile case, and things are out there in the press and social media, there is a lot of pressure to get a conviction. Any conviction, any arrest. They don't really